excited to host all of you here. Apart from all of you who are present here physically, we are also going to be joined by, in fact, we are already joined by more than 1,000 participants who have registered for the virtual event, which is being streamed live, and many others will be joining over the social media sites where this event is being streamed live. Now, so today's event is about the big agenda of legacy waste management and dumpsite remediation. And today we are privileged to have a pool of finest speakers and panelists in the symposium to talk about this big agenda. And the word legacy waste has received probably a lot of public attention across the nation in the wake of Swachh Bharat Mission 2.0 to make the Indian cities garbage free. The Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs has come up with this very strong mandate to strengthen the process of dumpsite remediation with a massive commitment of financial devolution to support all the cities and reduce their financial burden as much as possible, which is a great thing. And apart from that, there are deadlines this time. So this time the SBM2 is way different from SBM1, at least in terms of the financial devolution, because in order to get the additional central assistance under this flagship scheme, the cities will have to meet certain deadline. So it's a kind of performance linked disbursal in this case, you can say. Center for Science has been working extensively to support the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs with research and evidence-based learning, and then use the knowledge for capacity building of all the stakeholders. And in this process, CSC has researched and developed 3 toolkits, namely legacy waste management and dumpsite remediation. And the other toolkits are about preparing the city solid waste action plan, which is a mandate under SBM 2.0 to get financial assistance and technical assistance. So we will be releasing all these 3 toolkits today. If I may now request my colleague Mohsen Gupta and Richa to please honor the speakers on the stage with the books in typical CSC style before we actually proceed with the agenda. So these books are basically, ma'am, a compendium of best practices that we published with Niti Aayog, and 2 books.
It's a very interesting book. It's a book of recipes, traditional food, looking at recipes but linking food to livelihoods and to nutrition. So it's very interesting. Nature, nutrition, and this love the cover. Isn't it? Yeah. Yes. This is one plan for which every practice. Absolutely. That's why it's such a favorite of us. This is
Thank you, ma'am. So basically, this event is about creating an enabling environment and an ecosystem, because while we proceed with the sessions that are planned for the day, it's quite a long day. We need participation across the stakeholders to make this mammoth target a possible challenge to meet by the end of 2026, which is basically the mandate of SBM 2.0. Now, without any further time, if I may request my Director General, Sunita Narayanji, to please deliver her inaugural address.
Siddharth, can you put it on? So firstly, let me welcome Rupa ji here once again from all of us. We have the privilege of having a very dynamic joint secretary in the ministry, somebody who really, for us, we're always looking for people like you, Rupa, because for us, we know that the larger purpose is about both the policy and the practice. If you don't get the policy right, the practice will always struggle. And I think that's really where we have found with you a very willing and an open-minded person who really has practiced things differently and is willing to walk that extra mile. So thank you so much for doing what you do. So I wanted to talk a little bit, can we have the lights? Maybe, today? So I wanted to talk a little bit, give a bigger picture. I know the people in this room understand it, but before we dive into legacy waste, which my colleague Richa will do, she knows that subject much better than I do. I thought we should start with the bigger picture on waste, because we cannot take legacy waste as a side issue, as an issue which is different from the way cities manage their waste. And I think that's really where we need to understand. We know very clearly that solid waste is a problem. It is adding to the health burden in our cities. It pollutes our groundwater. It's a place for mosquitoes to breed. It is also adding to the economic burden of city municipalities as they struggle to collect and transport. Sorry. Oh, you want to, okay. Is it being broadcast as well? What is very important for us as waste people working in waste to understand that as cities, as India gets richer, we will produce more waste. So we are not even beginning to see the full amount of waste that we will be drowned under. And this is the time really to correct our strategies as we go forward. It's also very clear that the composition of waste will change. Now, we are here to discuss the end effect of actually mismanaging our waste system, where we have created massive dump sites, huge problem of legacy waste, and the economic cost today of cleaning up those waste sites is something that we as a society are beginning to bear. But a lot of what we do in waste management has to do with what is the composition of that waste. And we also know that as the country gets richer, as we get more affluent, as we get more urbanized, as we get into all the bad habits that the rich and the more developed part of the world has, we will change the composition of our waste, and the fraction, which is a biodegradable fraction, will actually go down, and the fractions which are paper, plastic, glass will actually go up, which means that our capacity to segregate, reuse, recycle is critical today. If you look at these two cities, this is a waste composition chart of Muzaffarpur versus Vijayawada. So clear. Muzaffarpur, the bulk of the waste is biodegradable waste. This is in Bihar. As compared to Vijayawada, if you look at it, food waste is only 43% of the waste is food waste. Add to it horticulture waste. Now, the policy agenda, I think for India, which we have now understood and accepted. And I think we as Indians should be very proud of the fact that our government is actually working a different path going forward. It is a policy agenda that says waste is a resource, do not waste waste, but reuse and recycle. It is also a policy agenda which accepts that we are too poor. In fact, I would argue every rich country has to adopt this as well, too poor to use land to dump waste. And therefore, zero landfill has to be the approach. The third part of the policy agenda, which has been accepted, is that we need to build livelihoods out of waste collection, processing. So these have to be sustainable, they have to be safe, but waste really can become a massive form of livelihood generation in our country if we do resource recovery and believe in the circular economy. Rupa ji is here, but I will say this to her, that I believe SPM 2.0 is a real game changer, Rupa ji, because you have encapsulated all these principles as a matter of policy today as we move forward. If we look at this, then within SBM 2.0, today segregation of waste at source is the mantra. It is not something that will be done later. It is part of the policy. Most importantly, Rupaji, we have seen, and we are very excited to see the fact that in the ranking of cities that you do, you have given now higher marks to segregation at source, because cities have to feel good about doing a different waste management strategy. If we measure and benchmark cities on the old paradigm, we will never drive behavior change in a city. And so it is very exciting for us to see that the SBM 2.0 has very clearly now and walked this extra mile to say you will have a wet waste stream, you will have a dry waste stream, and you will have a CND waste stream in a city. And the most important thing is that only inert fractions and processed rejects will be sent to sanitary landfills. We know we are not doing that today, maybe not across the country. But the fact is that once policy gives the guidance, and today the funding that is being given through MAUA will be based on this policy, it will drive change. And I think for all of us sitting in this room, I really believe this is a very exciting moment, because we then can be part of this enormously ambitious and challenging program of the government of India. This has not been done at the scale as we are talking about in India ever before. If you look at the waste management strategies of a country like the US or Australia, they are still landfill-driven strategies. Europe definitely has a strategy where segregation is incentivized, where processing happens, but it happens in a relatively rich country. How do we do the same in our part of the country, in our part of the world? How do we drive this change? I think that's a very interesting and an exciting part of the waste management strategy as we go forward. This is also from SBM 2.0, and it is very clear what then are the preferred strategies that cities have to follow. That if you have biodegradable waste, which you have to segregate, then you could do compost, you could do bio-CNG, you could then give it to farmers, you could also do resource recovery through methanation and use it as a fuel. Non-biodegradable waste is also in terms of different fractions of the waste, in terms of what can be resource recovered, what is non-recyclable, and what is hazardous. And I think that's the strategy moving forward when we come to legacy waste has to be based on this at the back. Because if it isn't, then we will clean up one legacy waste and yet have another mountain next to it. And that really is critical for us as we move forward in discussing. What is very clear is that the landfill strategy has to be limited. In fact, Rupaji, for me, the one thing, the missing piece still is, we still have a tipping fee going to the landfill. And we are struggling because many cities tell us that because of this tipping fee, we are still creating an incentive for people to bring large amounts of waste to the landfill because they get measured and get paid at the landfill based on the weight. If we could create the opposite, which is to say that you will be charged to bring waste to the landfill. So you have a landfill tax rather than a tipping fee. I think that to me is one part of this missing puzzle here. And I'm hoping that certain cities will start practicing this and we will start seeing a policy therefore arrive out of this, because this clearly is something that cities are struggling with. So very briefly, the agenda moving forward based on the SBM 2.01 segregation. This is an Achilles heel. This is tough to practice at scale in cities, but we are seeing it happen. We are seeing many cities do it also at scale, but it has to be done at source. It cannot be done as many people think that I can bring mixed waste to a waste to energy plant and then mechanically, magically, it will get sorted out. I have been to many waste to energy plants
where this philosophy was part of the reason why the waste to energy plant was actually sold to city governments. कि आप ले लीजिए, इसको बना लीजिए और आप फिक्र मत करिए, उसके बाद आपका सारा वेस्ट कहीं एनर्जी बन जाएगा. And in all the plants I have been to, the plant managers are struggling to deal with the mixed waste that comes. They cannot sort it out. They burn the mixed waste, and as a result of it, they really don't get energy out of it. It's actually a plant which is running just because of the subsidy that is paid for sending the waste to the plant. There is no resource recovery happening here. There is no energy generation happening here. So we have to understand that segregation is at the core of any resource recovery activity that we take on. But this also means that we cannot, and this many cities and residents complain that we segregate, but then the municipality does not. So the transportation processing is absolutely critical. So segregate, segregate, segregate is actually the mantra of waste management. Agenda 2, all good cities where we have seen good practices emerge are practicing this, that they have to involve the informal sector. Rupaji's own state of Orissa is doing some incredibly good work in not just involving the informal sector, but also looking at the transgender community, looking at disadvantaged groups in society and involving them in the business of waste management. But the fact is that today India is not drowning in its waste. Our landfills are still at 1/5 capacity that they would be, only because the poor in our world actually pick up the waste before it goes to the landfill. They recycle and they sort and they produce goods out of it. I'm not sure how many of you have been to Tikri. Have you? Asia's largest plastic sorting place. Rupaji, it is worth a compulsory visit for everyone, because when you get there, you understand the labor, the skill that it takes to segregate and sort every bit of the material into different streams. It is really worth understanding how we need to reward this sector, how we need to promote it. I mean, DDA did create the only plastic market in the country. We do need many more places to be created and not way out of our cities. But the Kabadiwala has to become central in our master plans, has to become situated where we can actually make sure that our waste can be processed and reprocessed. The third very important agenda which cities are struggling with, and this I have to say, I was hoping that Prashantji would be here. He's not able to make it. I have made this point very clear to the Ministry of Environment that our policies for plastic management are not going far enough at all. We have to do, I feel the Mahua, Rupaji, and I'm not saying it because you're sitting here, I really mean it. Mahua, I think because of the fact that you are dealing with cities and you have such a real challenge, you have been able to be far more innovative in your policy. The plastic management policy is still too timid. It just does not go far enough. So the current policy on carry bags, for instance, to manage carry bags based on microns is impossible to regulate. We all went to Tanzania, and it is incredible to see the cleanliness in Tanzania, in Dar, in Lake Victoria. Why? Because they have an absolute ban on the use of plastic carry bags. There is no micron business. It is no plastic carry bags. And we have seen this operating in Himachal. We have seen it operating in many states of this country, where states themselves are saying this micron-based regulation will just not work. The second, and I think this is where cities may have to ask for a greater action on this, is that we have to ban, phase out items that cannot be recycled. And the biggest problem that cities are facing are multi-layered plastic and pouches. We also need to promote the recycling industry, and I will talk about that. And of course, nothing in plastic management will work unless we do segregation at source. As I said, multi-layered plastic is turning out to be one of the biggest issues. I went to see some work of PROs. PROs is what they're called, right? And what was very clear was here were PROs being given this assignment under EPR, go collect pouches. And they've collected pouches and they're all stored up in huge numbers inside the PRO. Why? Where will they go? This city does not have a cement plant close to it. Who will pay for transportation to the cement plant? Collection of the pouches is virtually impossible. Okay. Collection of all the multi-layered bags that we get all our food packaging is impossible. We have to come up with a much more clearer and much more stronger policy. I think the single-use plastic policy of the government of India is very good, but it is distracting and not going far enough when it comes to multi-layered packaging, which has been put under EPR. It's also very clear that if it is not profitable to collect, you cannot recycle, you can only incinerate. The cost of transport is high. And the biggest question, which I think we will also discuss today when it comes to legacy waste, is who will pay for transport? And that becomes a very big issue when it comes to all the waste streams that we are looking at. We also have to understand the politics of recycling when it comes to plastics. Industry always tells us it's not a problem because whatever we generate is recycled. But then why do you find so much plastic in the landfill sites? And that's something that the more characterization of waste is coming from landfills, we are understanding that a lot of waste, which should have been recycled, is ending up there. And the reason is it's not profitable. It is not cost effective. It is not feasible. So we really need to understand what recycling means, what has a value, so it will be collected and processed, what is the cost of this recycling, and will it be, and who will bear this cost. My last part of the agenda is a little controversial for city managers, but I want to say it in any case, because I very strongly believe in this. Waste management environmental management has always worked on the principle of NIMBY, not in my backyard. So where the rich of a city live, you will never see a nuclear plant. You will never see a toxic, hazardous landfill site. You will never even see a compost site where the rich live. It is never in my backyard. It is always in the backyard of where the poor live. Which is why Ghazipur, which is why all the landfill sites that we have are where the poor live. But this country is changing, and it's changing for the good. The poor in India are getting literate. The poor in India are getting powerful. They are also saying, not in my backyard. Which is why there is very little chance for any greenfield landfill to be created today in our cities. And I think that is good. I learned this from Kerala. When Kerala, of course, is the most populated part of India. And that is why when it came to Alapi, when it came to Trivandrum, not finding a landfill site, they first sent off their waste to Karnataka. Karnataka said, no, we don't want your waste. Then they had to talk about how do you segregate at the household level. The city government has actually said, we will not even collect your waste. You have to be responsible for it because we can't send it anywhere. So I really think that this principle of NIMBY must not be opposed by city governments, but actually be celebrated. Now, let's come to today, Rupaji, we are discussing legacy waste. And I think this is an enormous opportunity as much as it is a problem today. We have according to CPCB's data, we have over 3,000 dump sites. I'm not sure whether we actually have, if this is an accurate number or if we have many more, because a lot of the dump sites would not even be classified as a dump site. But we know that precious land, and land is very precious in cities, is lost under dump sites. It adds to environmental pollution, groundwater contamination. I don't need to go into it. We have to make sure that those dump sites, which are eyesores, pollution source in our cities, are removed. The opportunity is the recovery of land. A lot of the dump sites are not so far away from the city. Even if they're far away from the city, land is at a premium in our cities. We can use the recovered land for waste processing and, most importantly, for recovery into green areas, which a number of cities, best practice cities, have actually done. And this is where you get a great climate co-benefit of reducing methane and adding to the carbon sink when it comes to green areas. Rupaji, one of the areas that we at CSE want to look at, and we are not able to find more data, is what is the methane generation from our landfill sites. Now, it may be a standard methane generation that you could take from Western landfill sites and multiply it. But on the other hand, given the composition of our waste, it may not be as high. So we need to understand it before we actually talk about this. And the data we have is still very poor on it. So we would welcome any help on this as we put together this data on methane. The reason is that we want to be able to give Rupaji even more ammunition for the legacy waste program to say what kind of methane abatement strategy this would actually add to. Because we can actually, if you can put a number to it, you can add it to your climate performance records. But we need to know before we can talk about this. Now, Richa will present this in greater detail, but when I looked at this chart that Richa has in this report that you will see right now, I found it fascinating, Richa. I found when I looked at the fractions of waste that are coming out, it actually tells us where we went wrong at the beginning. Okay, so if you look at one of the largest fraction across all, we've got data from Mumbai, Ahmedabad, Hyderabad, and Delhi. One of the largest fractions is stones, which means really the C&D waste problem is something that we need to deal with, because then you would get rid of the big fractions of stone and bulk waste that we see in the site. The second, of course, is the whole issue of combustible waste, which, if I look, is anywhere between 4 to 6% of the total. But it also depends because the site may be much bigger, so the quantity of it will still be pretty large, which means that our plastic management, as I discussed earlier, really needs to be reviewed. But the most important is the fine fraction. Now, I've been asking Richa, what does this fine fraction mean? And from what I can hear, and also when I've been to these landfill recovery sites, where fine fraction has been pulled out, it's very clear this is all mineralized fractions of either biodegradable waste or anything that could turn into soil. So which really means that your ability to be able to get rid of that part of that fraction has to do so much with what you do with segregation, with taking waste, wet waste out of the waste stream completely. And that then becomes so important as we move ahead. So in terms of moving ahead, and we will have a whole day of discussions, but I want to put to you some of the big learnings that I've had when I have gone to the legacy waste remediation sites. One, I think as a group, we must learn from best practices. And I think, Atin, what you're doing today to bring the 3 cities explaining their best practices will be a good knowledge creator. Also from companies who are doing this will help us to understand what works on the ground, what doesn't work. But the most critical issue that is coming out is that you have to plan deliberately for the sorted fractions of waste. I mean, every waste remediation site I've gone to There has been a brilliant trommeling machine sorting out the waste in different fractions. And then those different fractions have created new mountains of waste. Okay. And then you ask them, they say, but we don't know where this will go because we don't have a cement plant close by. We don't have the money to transport it. The NHAI is not taking our waste to the new road that they are making. We essentially, this entire exercise could go up in smoke, in fact, go up in dust or go down in dust if we don't sort out and plan for the fractions, sorted fractions. But most importantly, and along with this, and I know Rupaji has built this into her policy and her plan when they're funding, is that you must not add to new waste coming into the legacy waste dump site, because otherwise this will not work. The dump site I have been to, and I found that on one hand, the trommeling machine was cleaning up the site. On the other hand, new waste was coming to the site. And so as you were cleaning up, you were creating a new dump site. And that would be a perpetual exercise. It would be the perfect Keynesian answer, which is that you keep digging holes and then filling them up. And it will never get us to where we want to be. We also need, and this is where, Rupaji, we will need your intervention. We need better policies that will promote reuse of the sorted fraction. I have been asking my colleague Richa and Atin to see what are the various other opportunities where these sorted fractions can actually go. And what policy barriers exist so that these sorted fractions don't go to that place. For instance, can there be a policy which says that when you're doing road construction, you cannot, and I'm sorry, Rupaji, I'm a little old-fashioned on this, so I do believe that certain things have to be mandatory, because otherwise it becomes, everybody looks for an easy answer. That can you say that you have to first use the sorted fraction for road building, for the most benign. I mean, I'm a little worried when you say filling up low-lying areas, because all ponds and tanks will be filled up. Okay, so we need to be careful in the wording, but we know that one of the biggest activities in this country is road building. That's clearly one where it can go. Similarly, Rupaji, we are just finishing a report on cement industry and decarbonization of the cement industry. What is most fascinating in the cement industry is that if the cement industry will decarbonize, then its use of incinerable solid waste from cities must go up. Okay? So both in terms of slag and fly ash use, so substitute limestone, but also to substitute coal. So it's a very interesting strategy as we move ahead, but we will need to give little more thought to where the barriers are and what can we do to actually make sure that this becomes more deliberate in execution. And the final point which I've been making consistently is that it's not a tailpipe solution. It has to be part of that SBM 2.0 reinvented waste management strategy. Now, CSC's work in this has been to document best practices. We did this report with Niti some months ago, where we looked at best practices, what is working, what needs to be done, what more can be done. And clearly what came out is that there are huge opportunities and good role models in this country where people are doing the SBM, practicing SBM 2.0 at scale. Segregating wet waste from dry waste, planning for compost or biomethanation, planning for dry waste management separately, making sure that you have zero landfill site approach in your city. So it is being practiced, and I think we need to celebrate that because it's not happening now in just one city or two. It's actually happening across the country in many such cities, and we need to learn from that. And that really is what my colleague Atin and his entire team will continue to do, which is our role is to build knowledge on what works, build capacity recognize the good work so that models are created and more is done. Use the forums of meetings, study tours, help desk, documentation to actually build this whole practice upscaling effort that we need. Because policy into practice takes a generation. But most importantly, it needs people who will keep following that practice and celebrating the change. Finally, and I think for all of us as waste managers, the mantra and the rule has to be that every backyard is a front yard. And that really is the way we have to manage our waste. Because if we don't, then we will continue to use somebody else's backyard to dump our waste. And that is really something I learned from Kerala. And I think it is a principle for this entire country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for setting the context of the whole event and sharing your experience in your own way. So I would now request Richa to bring the toolkits to Rupa ma'am and Sunita ji so that we can release the toolkits officially. And I would also request Sukanya to upload the link for the virtual participants so that they can download it while we release it here physically. And I would also request the team to share the copies with all the participants over here.
Please come. I can't see the other team members. They're probably busy somewhere, but please come. Please come.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rupa ma'am. Thank you so much, Sunita ji. I would request my colleagues to share the hard copies or printed copies of the toolkits with all the colleagues who are present over here. Let me now invite Madam Rupa Mishra, who is one of the architect and yeah. So sorry. My sincerest apologies. So let me now invite my colleague, Dr. Richa Singh, who is also the author of the toolkit on legacy dumpsite remediation, to share the key findings, and then we'll hear from Rupa ma'am.
Sukanya.
Hello, good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you so much, Sunita ma'am and Atin, for giving this opportunity to me to work on this very challenging topic, which is very close to my heart. So I'm here to talk about the key findings of our report on legacy waste management and dumpsite remediation. So before I go ahead, I'd like to brief about what exactly we are going to cover here, the major key findings. So we'll talk about the current status of biomining and dumpsite remediation in the country. We'll also talk about what exactly is legacy waste and how is it different from the fresh municipal solid waste, because this really impacts the choice of technology that is going to be adopted for managing the legacy waste in terms of its composition and also in terms of its percentage of various waste fractions. We'll also talk about the approaches or methods for treatment of legacy waste or dumpsite remediation, where we will briefly discuss about biocapping, biomining, and the hybrid model that we have in India. Then we will talk about the steps in biomining and what should be the key considerations for the urban local bodies and the different stakeholders who are involved in this process. And finally, the challenges and the way forward. So let us start with the Swachh Bharat Mission 2.0 and what is the implication on the dump site remediation. So the SBM 2.0 aims to achieve the vision of garbage-free cities over the next 5 years by ensuring that the waste is, various components of the waste is segregated at the source itself and it is channelized to various appropriate recycling facilities. And in such a manner, negligible amount of waste should ideally reach to the landfills. And most importantly, all the legacy waste dump sites should be removed, should be reclaimed and by following the environmentally sustainable techniques and for minimizing the environmental and health hazards. So the deadline which is given by the Swachh Bharat Mission 2.0 for the cities having less than 10 lakh population is 31st March 2023. And for the cities having more than 10 lakh population, the deadline is given as 31st March 2024. So basically the cities have couple of years to reclaim their sites and it's such a challenging task. If we look at the legal mandate, we have the Solid Waste Management Rules 2016. This is also mentioned under the duty of urban local bodies to investigate, analyze all the existing open dump site and take actions for the remediation and biomining of such dump sites. However, because of the mismanagement of waste since many ages, I think ma'am has talked about it. And we have been dealing with nearly 3,159 dump sites in the country as reported by the Central Pollution Control Board. And ma'am, you are absolutely correct. This is an underestimated value because some of the research studies, they have estimated that we have to deal with nearly 1,100 to 1,300 million tons of legacy waste in our country. So if we calculate, we have estimated that what would be the cost of remediating and treating that much amount of legacy waste, and it is humongous. It is nearly 1 lakh crores of rupees that we have to spend just because we have been mismanaging the waste in the past 3 decades. And this is equivalent to 74% of the amount which is allocated to the SPM 2.0, the total budget outlay.
Quantum that you're looking at, that you're saying could be estimated?
It should be, ma'am, between 1,100 to 1,300 million tons. And if we consider that the average cost is 800 rupees per ton, it will come out as 1,04,000 crore rupees. So besides the economic impacts, we all know what are the environmental and health hazards associated with the dump sites and open dump sites specifically. If you can see the slide, the major culprit here is the mixed waste, which is ending up into this landfill. And mixed waste is, it composed of biodegradable organics, which and ideally should not end up into the dump sites. Why? Because once it reaches the dump site start acting as an ecosystem itself, where there is a lot of interaction and exchanges taking place between the abiotic and biotic factors. The microbes will act on the food particles, and then a lot of methane will be produced because of the anaerobic digestion or anaerobic decomposition of the waste. So since this is happening in uncontrolled condition, a lot of methane is generated, and there is no quantification being done. Some small studies has been done which suggest that it is 2 or maybe 1% of the total greenhouse gas emission in the country, but that again is very questionable and debatable considering the standard protocols. Along with that, we all know about the surface water pollution and groundwater pollution that can happen because of the leachate which is generated from this waste. It might contain leachable heavy metals or toxic metals, and also some form of halogenated hydrocarbons, aliphatic hydrocarbons, all sort of pollution. You just imagine one thing, like we can say that open dump sites are the actual pollution hubs because they are not contaminating land only, they're contaminating the air, they're contaminating the water, both groundwater as well as surface water. So what is legacy waste, and how is it different from fresh municipal solid waste? We know that in fresh municipal solid waste, 50 to 60% is the wet biodegradable organics. Then we have this scrap combustible material. Then we also have some sanitary waste and also domestic hazardous waste. In this case also, it seems it's a mixed waste. And because of decomposition, the organic fraction will decompose over due course of time, and the composition will differ according to the age of the landfill. If it's old waste, the organics will be decomposed and there will be more finer fraction, as ma'am was telling in her presentation. And the other thing which will not be decomposed is the plastics, or anything which is inert in nature, the C&D waste, the fine fractions from the C&D waste, and which actually makes your significant contribution in the legacy waste composition. So this waste is aged municipal solid waste. How it is defined in different government authorities, it is not defined at how much a waste should be, like how old a waste should be to be qualified as legacy waste. But in general, even if it is produced yesterday, it should be called as legacy waste because it has to be treated and it has to be reclaimed. It is combination of partly, completely, or undecomposed organic material. It contains scrap polymeric and combustible fraction and also a major significant fraction of inerts. Indian dump sites contains a mix of legacy waste and fresh waste. Why? Because these dump sites are still operational in nature. So we are bioremediating the legacy waste, but we are also mixing, you're dumping the fresh waste every day. So it's a mix of fresh waste as well as legacy waste, which makes the biomining process even more difficult. Characteristics and composition are different, which affects the choice of treatment technology and the end use of the recovered material. So from our research, what we have seen is a significant fraction of fine soil-like material is there, which can range between 40 to 60%. Then we have the combustible material, which can range between 15 to 18% on weight basis. The coarser particles such as broken bricks, stones, etc., which could be nearly 15 to 20%. And then there could be some other miscellaneous fractions also, which are like broken glass, metallic fractions such as razor, needles, sanitary waste, and diapers. And it might constitute nearly 1 to 5% of the total legacy waste. So let us talk about the status of dump site remediation in India. As you can see, this graph is representing the number of dump sites in each of the states. And so it is the highest number of dump sites are present in the state of Uttar Pradesh, followed by Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Gujarat, and so on. And this is very important because it talks about this pie chart. It talks about number of dump sites versus the number of dump sites which has been reclaimed and capped in the last couple of years. And also the dump sites which has been converted to sanitary landfills. I'm yet to visit these sites where the dump site has been converted into sanitary landfills, because this is practically impossible to convert a legacy waste dump sites into a sanitary landfill. So this is also given by the Central Pollution Control Board annual reports, which suggest that there are few dump sites in northeastern states which has been converted into sanitary landfill facilities. So that is why now you see we are struggling to find environmentally sustainable solutions for managing the bigger dump sites we have in our country, including the Okla, Balswa, Gazipur in our own city, Delhi, also Perangudi, Kodangayur in Chennai. Then we have Devnar, Mulund in Mumbai. So these massive dump sites are the biggest challenges for it, because these are, one concessionaire is not enough to solve the problem of this legacy waste. And the other factor is, since they do not have any mechanism or any way through which they can actually manage their fresh waste. So it becomes a vicious circle. So they are remediating some part of their legacy waste and dumping fresh waste again every day. So now we'll talk about the available options for bioremediation or biomining of the legacy waste. The most preferred option, which is also mandated by several NGT orders, is biomining of the waste. Why? Because here, entire waste is treated. That's the first thing. So we make sure that biomining is not just mere trommeling of the waste. We make sure that the undecomposed and partly decomposed legacy waste is properly stabilized first. And then it is sorted and segregated into different fractions. So in this way, the kind of inerts that we are getting, or fine like soil-like material that we are getting, is completely stabilized. But having said that, it is very, very essential to make sure that it is free from any kind of contamination also. We'll talk about it in the later slide. The benefit of this method is the fact that we are getting the land, the reclaimed land. We cannot afford to waste our land the way we are doing in Delhi, or we are doing in a city like Mumbai, where land price is extremely high. And if you look at the size of Deonar site, it is more than 300 acres of land which has been wasted because of the legacy waste. So here we are getting the land as a resource. Entire waste fractions are used for gainful application. Now, this is something that we are recommending, that, biomining should not be called as something where land is reclaimed just by labeling the waste on over it on the land or the same site itself. We have to make sure that the various fractions that we are getting in the process of biomining are also used for gainful applications. Biocapping of the dump site is the second option, where they claim that they can recover the leachate. They can collect the leachate and treat it. They have mechanism to collect the gases and treat it. But again, this is practically not feasible to collect 100% of methane or 100% of the leachate from a landfill or a dump site, which is not designed and constructed and operated in a scientific manner or engineered manner. We can do that, of course, for sanitary landfills. And there is a design criteria that says that, okay, once the landfill attains a specific height, should be capped as per the CPCB guidelines or as per the law. But if it is an unscientific landfill or a dump site, it's not advisable to cap it because it will have some environmental impacts later. In this process, land is not recovered because you are just capping the landfill. Yes, of course, they claim that it can be used after, allowing the land to reclaim, or it is known as post-closure monitoring. So basically, if a landfill or a dump site is capped, it has to be, you have to leave that site as it is for 15 years. You have to do all the post-closure environmental monitoring systems, including the ambient air quality and the groundwater surface. So it has a lot of cost associated with it, and also the environmental impacts. The hybrid model, so there is one city called Bhopal, which has adopted this model, which is a combination of biomining and biocapping. So a part of land is biocapped and a part of land is reclaimed. Here a fraction of waste is treated also. And then rest of the unused waste is biocapped. But this is also not very sustainable in terms of environment and economical aspects. So this is a very simplistic diagram representing how the biomining activity takes place. So first of all, secondary data collection, or which is also known as pre-feasibility study. Then site is investigated for various ecological characteristics. Then execution plan is prepared. There is installation of plant machineries and equipments, resource mobilization plan. I will talk about each of these steps one by one in the later slide. So you see the very first step is pre-feasibility assessment, including thorough site investigation studies, surveys, and waste characterization. This is very, very important. And this is something which most of the ULVs are not doing, and they are just contracting the tender to different players who are in this field. But they need to understand how is the landfill, like what is the age of the landfill, what is the waste characteristics, and then this will help them to plan the disposal and also the gainful application of the recovered fractions. So if I know that, okay, my Ghazipur dump site has this much percent of soil fraction, this much percent of polymeric waste, and this much is something that I can't do anything about it, and I just have to put it into the sanitary landfills, it will be easy for me to understand that, okay, this is going to be the budget for managing my waste. And also, these people, these cement industry is the nearest one where I can send my polymeric waste. These are the identified low-lying areas where I can put my inert fraction or the fine soil-like material. So this is something which is not being done by any of the ULVs, and that is why at times, once they're just excavating the material, putting it there at the site, and they don't know what to do with it. So this comes under the planning phase. Stabilization and spraying of the bioculture to produce the volume and mass of the waste. This is also not something that is not happening anywhere. Very few places this is happening efficiently, but this is very critical step in the biomining operations, where you put, as I said, legacy waste is a mixture of completely decomposed, partially decomposed, and undecomposed material. So it's very, very important for us to make sure that the composition is such that it is not causing any kind of environmental hazards. When I say it is stabilized, I mean to say that it is physically, chemically, and biologically inactive in nature. So processing of the excavate in most of the ULBs, including Gurugram and many of the ULBs, what they're doing, they're just trommeling it and without stabilization. And that is why the recovered fractions is of no use, because none of these cement factories will ever take any kind of material which is so much contaminated with inert fractions. Once you stabilize it, it will completely, the inert fraction will go away. And that is how it helps. And then the processing after the stabilization is done, processing of the excavated fraction should take place. Utilization of extracted fractions in various gainful applications. For example, the polymeric waste should go to the co-processing plants, and the inert fraction or the soil-like material should go to the low-lying areas. Clearing and conditioning of the recovered land. This is also very important. And once the land is reclaimed, we actually do not have any policy which is talking about how many years we should allow the land before using it for any gainful application, before developing any infrastructural activity on that land. So the solid waste regulations 2016, it talks about post-closure monitoring, but it doesn't talk about post-mining monitoring. What are the different parameters that should be inspected? And what should be the role of the State Pollution Control Board or Central Pollution Control Board on this regard is extremely important. So in pre-feasibility study, technical and operational feasibility is very, very important. So there are two modes, it can be done. First is ULB can, if the quantity of waste is limited, and the ULB can plan to do the biomining operations themselves. In that scenario, they have to make sure that do they have required numbers of equipment, machineries, or the manpower, skilled manpower, which is required for doing this project or not. Otherwise, they can contract this operations. Then we have economic feasibility, because as I was telling, most of the biomining projects are under budgeted. Why? Because we never do the pre-feasibility study. We don't know how much is the quantum of waste. We don't do contour surveying. We just estimate some random number will come to our mind and we say, okay, this much should be the quantity of legacy waste in my dump site. But this is very bad, because in that scenario, we'll not be able to ask for the right amount of money from the government for the biomining process. Then the legal feasibility. Now, this also has a policy implication. Every state has its own way of giving clearance or the permission to carry out the biomining process. We need one uniform law governing that, so that it will not be a time-consuming process for the contractors as well as the ULBs who are engaged in biomining process. And also the timeline feasibility. Target deadline is given to all the ULBs, and they have to make sure that their remediation takes place within the time boundaries. But at the same time, they have to plan the operations in such a way that they can actually, they have a proper mechanism for monitoring if it is happening or not. So timeline feasibility is also extremely important in the pre-feasibility study. Besides, of course, what is the age of landfill, some preliminary data about the dump sites need to be collected by the ULB.
If I may just ask a question.
Yes.
When you come to legal feasibility, a question that I've always wondered is this termed as hazardous waste? Is it allowed across states for transport?
Ma'am, this is a very important question. So the miscellaneous items I was referring to, which will comprise from 1% to 5%, it might contain some hazardous entities also. So suppose a landfill is a 50-year-old landfill, it might contain some hazardous entities.
Whether it might, the question is, as per the law,
it should be governed under the hazardous waste regulation 2016.
So is it right now? Because
no, it's not. It's not happening.
Even more problems. If Delhi has, okay, we'll open it up. I've opened the Pandora's box, finish. And then
yeah. So it's not happening right now, ma'am, but it should be treated as per hazardous.
We have a lot of questions also.
Yeah, so I'll go to the sampling protocol. So we have recommended that we should go for stratified random sampling, where you can divide the entire dump site into 3 stratum at least. If it is a 45 meter, the height is 45 meters, should be divided into 3 equal parts. Because the composition will vary as we, go to different stratum. The composition of waste at the deeper level, at the bottom level of the landfill, will have more soil content in it because it will be like more decomposed material. The same doesn't hold true for the middle layer. It will have some completely or partially decomposed material, and the part where the fresh waste is getting dumped will have undecomposed material, something which is fresh municipal solid waste. So it has to be sampled in such a way that you get representative sample to make sure that the different fractions of the waste are treated properly. This is also something that we have proposed. This is the unit operations in a dump site remediation plan. As you can see, we need to have temporary storage sheds for storing different fractions of the waste, including the fine soil-like material, the hazardous material, as ma'am was mentioning, and also making sure that, okay, if this material is hazardous, it should be governed under the hazardous and other waste management regulation 2016, not by under the municipal solid waste regulation. And it will have some implication over the transboundary movement also. If you don't have a sanitary hazardous waste landfill or a CHWT SDF plant in your vicinity, then the movement might have some policy implications. So then it should also have leachate treatment plant, which is also not a very, it is not practiced anywhere, but I think this is extremely important to have leachate treatment plant at the site itself, so that wherever you are witnessing puddles of leachate, or if it is, because most of the moisture gets lost in the process of stabilization. The mass, volume, and moisture reduction takes place in the stabilization process. But in a bigger dump site, we might witness cases of puddles of leachate oozing out from various locations. Such leachate, there should be some mechanism to collect the leachate and treat it in the leachate treatment plant. Then we need to have some fire control units, especially for the bigger dump sites like Ghazipur, Okhla, Balswa, and also some emergency preparedness and risk assessment studies should be done in order to assess what could be the potential risk associated with biomining operations, especially in an area where you can see smoldering of fires and such unstable slopes, etc. Considerations during the legacy waste excavation and material handling. There has to be availability of PPEs, preparation of detailed operation plan, which I've already discussed about. Depth of the excavation is also very important. Most of the time, we don't know what is the depth of excavation because it could be, the dump site could be above ground, just like the normal landfills, could be below ground also. So we need to see what is the bottom of the legacy waste. We have to make sure that it's getting excavated from there itself. It should not be just labeling of the land and claiming that it is done. There should be provisions for odor and dust control, record keeping, regular monitoring and environmental monitoring of ambient air quality as well as the water quality is very, very critical. So these are the considerations during legacy waste processing and material handling. I think we have talked about each of these points, but I think the most important point here is space for waste processing. So if there is a dump site, because most of the time there is in most of the dump sites in the country, it seems it is not it's not a scientific sanitary landfill. It is not located in such a way, it's very congested. So having space for installing the machineries and the equipment which are necessary for biomining operations is very important. Can be done zone wise, like you convert a quarter of the landfill into windrows, do the operations over there, create some space so that you can go to the another quarter. Yes.
Sorry, I know so much and such good material too.
So this is important, and I would like to draw your attention here, ma'am. So there are potential application, of course, and in the panel discussion, we will talk about if this fine soil-like material can be used in road construction, what are the different challenges and how to mitigate those problems, and what are the environmental and health hazards which are associated with the application of these recovered material is also very important. Right now, we do not have any standards, any standard operating protocol or any methodology basically which actually tells us, okay, if this is fine fraction, please get it tested for these many parameters, and then this material is okay to be, disposed of or maybe used for low-lying areas filling. And these are some of the case studies that we have captured. I hope you all have got the copy of the report, so you can go through it. These are the, this is also very important, ma'am. I'll just like to take 5 minutes. I think not only the dump site remediation, solid waste management itself is, we need some policy intervention when it comes to the solid waste management in hilly areas, because their climatic conditions are very different from plain areas. Their topography is so different, and their challenges are even more than our challenges, because their waste dump sites has now become a part of the ecosystem. We really do not have any technology which can actually tell that, okay, contour survey we can do, but then what if it has become a part of the hill? Yeah. And then the cost is same. Their delivery service delivery cost is extremely high. They are not able to meet those costs, and also they do not have expertise. So we really need to build their capacity in terms of, and also like, can we do something about the extended projected timelines? Because for them, it's like we can work for 8 months because they have prolonged monsoon periods. So we can't do biomining operations or bioremediation during monsoons. That is also one of the challenging things. I think we have one representative from Leh who will be talking about the challenges. So they need to have specialized policy for mountainous regions, the places where the climatic conditions are harsh, outsourcing of services, comprehensive scoping, cluster-based approach. If they are small dump sites and small ULBs, they can go for cluster-based approach where state can actually.
But this also means, Richard, that hilly areas cannot afford landfills.
Exactly, absolutely, ma'am.
Yeah, I think that's what we need to emphasize.
Yes, they just can't afford to have any more landfills now, because it's critical for them to make sure that their ecosystem is much more fragile than ours. And it's very important for them to make sure that 100% of waste is getting treated. Because even if you go for, and I think Mr. Malik can talk about it, you go for site selection criteria for sanitary landfills, you have to find a flat surface. Even you can go for hilly, or they call it canyon landfill or something like that, but it's not recommended to do that. The law says that it should be avoided, but it doesn't say that it should not be there. So challenges are, of course, incorrect estimation of legacy waste quantum, which leads to under budgeting of these projects, absence of clear standards for post mining activities, which I have already explained about, lack of data on quantification, lack of availability of sanitary landfill sites, lack of protocols to ensure safety of personnel involved in biomining. And I'll go to the last slide. The way forward is developing a sustainable solid waste management plan. I'm glad that ma'am has already shared the thing that legacy waste management or dump site remediation should complement the fresh waste management issues also. A city needs to have a fresh waste management plan, a sustainable solid waste management plan, so that only a negligible fraction of waste will actually end up into the landfills or the dump sites. And ensuring maximum utilization of recovered fractions, developing standards for gainful utilization of recovered fractions, which I think it is not under the ULB's capacity, but I think here government has to intervene and develop standards for making sure that the recovered fractions are free from any kind of environmental contamination. Utilization of reclaimed land, what should be the ideal utilization, what should be the use of the reclaimed land should not be same as a biocapped land, which is there in the solid waste, mentioned in the solid waste regulation 2016. And capacity building is extremely important, and we in CSE has been doing this, and we are helping the ULBs to, understand the science and the methods of executing a successful biomining projects. And I think same holds true for the state pollution control authorities also. And the key to success, I think this has already been covered by ma'am, so I would not go into details, but source segregation is something which is non-negotiable. 100% of waste processing and treatment is a must, and only rejects and inert should ideally disposed of into the sanitary landfill. And landfilling is something, if you look at the integrated solid waste management hierarchy, this is the least preferred option. But unfortunately, in India, we have been following this. This was the most effort it was just landfilling is something, I think 50 to 60% of the waste which is generated in the country is landfill. I have a data about that also. So, ma'am, this is the last slide. If we are generating 1.5 lakhs tons of MSW every day, out of which 3% remains uncollected, which is equivalent to 4,500 tons per day. 27% is land disposed, which is equal to 40,500 tons per day. And 20, we don't have any data about what is happening to 23% of the waste, which is 34,500. So we can, if you calculate it, this is basically nearly 50% of the waste, which is either littered or it is land disposed. Thank you.
Correct you on this, Richa.
Yes, ma'am.
On this 47%, which is the biggest fraction, when I looked at the CPCB reports and they say processed and treated, it's also landfilling.
Absolutely, ma'am.
Because as per the law, and it's not their fault, as per the law which India made, and I think 2016 was therefore a change in the law, the initial law was landfilling.
Yeah.
And therefore, even now, when we say processing,
We mean that even if it is going to
a
landfill, it is processed. Yeah, so the MSW rules 2000, it actually considered landfilling also as processing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I think that is why the challenge is so big.
So thank you, everyone. Let's build a zero landfill nation for our future generations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richa. A very comprehensive presentation. Just to complement what Richa has presented, and if I connect that to the mandate that SBM2 comes up with. So now SBM2 ask every city to prepare city solid waste action plan and ensure that 80% of the current and projected generation is diverted from reaching the dump site. So that while we are jumping into the process of remediation of the existing legacy waste, we don't create another mountain by dumping the fresh waste. So, and then who could have been a better person to talk about all this issue than Rupa Mishra Madam, who is one of the architects of SBM2 guideline and the whole framework. And she's currently working as a joint secretary in the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and she's also the National Mission Director for SBM 2.0. Ma'am, I would now request you to please deliver your keynote address.
Thank you very much, Atinji. Namaskar and a very good morning to everyone present here. Respected Sunita ji, Director General of CSC, her entire team of very enthused and talented members of the CSC, participants from city administrations, whom I'm always happy to see, irrespective of the forum, practitioners, members of the industry, academicians, and everyone present physically here and connected to us through the virtual medium. It gives me great sense of satisfaction that this morning all of us have gathered here to discuss on this extremely important aspect of legacy dump site remediation. And what enthuses me more is that we are not talking of legacy dump site remediation as a side issue of waste management, but in fact, as a central issue of waste management. 8 years of Swachh Bharat mission, all of us have moved together through trying and testing times. And these 8 years have given us enormous learnings. While the learnings are so enormous that it is impossible for me to put it in a capsule in a few minutes, I would like to highlight few which will decide and determine the journey in the years ahead. And the first and foremost is it is absolutely urgent and it is an emergency to address the issues of waste and garbage and sanitation absolutely urgently. There is no question of a delay. It is an urgent, and there is a sense of urgency, and that kind of importance is being given at every level within the government and down below. The second important thing that comes with our learning of SBM phase 1 is we cannot afford ad hocism. We cannot afford to look at this entire gamut in a piecemeal and a pilot approach anymore. It is now or never. We have to address it in a 360-degree approach. Our methods have to be correct. Our processes have to be correct. And all the players who are concerned with this sector have to come together as one team to address the issues that have come before us. And the third important issue, it is people and people who matter. People who can make the change, people who are responsible for the situation that is around us, and it is people who can reverse what is there and make an impact for the years ahead. Given these three basic key learnings of phase 1, we move ahead to the phase 2, or what we popularly call as 2.0. And while, of course, there is a mission that comes in form of a overarching umbrella that sort of gives direction to ways ahead, to the tasks ahead, there will be various issues that we need to look at to ensure that the journey we undertake in these 5 years make the impact and the necessary change. Sunita ji before me and Richa, of course, now in a very brilliant presentation, have laid down various aspects that are already there as far as policy initiatives are concerned. I would just like to reiterate that as far as policy is concerned, the term that all of us in this family and team must use absolutely without any, I would say, without a doubt, is garbage-free cities. Sunita ji uses waste-wise cities, garbage-free cities, all of it are one and the same. So all of us in our entire dialogue, discourse, whichever forum, family, function, office, garbage-free cities or waste-wise cities have to be the centrality of our discussions and our activities. And so also in our policy. That land is important, that waste is a resource, that the environmental, social, and economic concerns of having dump sites and mindless landfills is enormous, and that our policy has to be towards zero landfill. There is absolutely no doubt about it. And the soul of it, the crux of it, will be 3R. 3R, which we will have to integrate in every bit of our action. In fact, I was very happy to look at the jute bag, the books and everything. I was a little unhappy looking at the badges. We could do in every point of our action minimizing waste. Every event has to be curated. Everything has to be curated so that those labels, we can do away with these labels. But the labels are recyclable? That's not required. No, it's not even required. It's not even required. All of us together in everything that we do, in every aspect of our movement, have to see mindfully and consciously how we can minimize waste, be it as personal individuals, as team, fraternities. Similarly, another thing that we have to see is while policy framework is there, continuous work will be there. Think tanks like all of you will keep giving inputs. We will keep reworking. And of course, the policy will keep evolving with times. The implementation strategy as on today's date has to be correct. And for that, we have a very simple, because we have to make it simple also for the cities and for partners to be able to implement. What is the simple thing that we are telling them? You are a city, there are so and so people, this is the kind of expected population growth. You have this kind of a footfall because you could be a tourist place, you could be heritage city, you could be XYZ. This is the kind of municipal solid waste that you could be generating. Every city must understand what is the kind of waste it generates. Unless we know our waste, we will never be able to plan effectively for the waste. Waste cannot be left to those 3-4 people who just sweep. It cannot be left to a sanitary inspector or a supervisor who will look at the periphery of the city. Waste has to be a central topic where every manager, every partner, everyone has to know what is the kind of waste that is generated from the city. The kind and the quantum of waste will determine what is the next step. So that's the first question we ask any city today when we start our conversation. Once you know the kind of waste and the characteristic of waste, then we ask a simple question. What is your plan to manage this waste? And that is exactly what the city solid waste action plan looks like. So you have so much of waste. This is the kind of characteristic. What is your plan to manage this fresh waste to prevent it from entering landfill? Tell us that. If this is your MRF is not the end of the journey. It is just the beginning of the journey. What are you going to do with that waste? Dry waste, wet waste, C&D waste is being discussed separately with each city. Along with that, the next question we say, and what about your old waste, the old waste which is lying somewhere in the outskirts of your city? What are you going to do about your waste? So when Government of India starts its dialogue with any city or state government, we do not look at projects in piecemeal any longer. The entire dialogue is a dialogue which is an end-to-end dialogue where we trigger them, we nudge them to look at the entire gamut of waste. So this is city's solid waste plan in brief for you. And funding is linked to the activities that they propose as a whole master plan and not as a singular project, because we cannot afford to look at singular projects any longer. And with that comes a very, very important role. While this dialogue looks very simple, sounds very simple, each of us in the waste family would know how difficult and complex it can be when it comes to addressing it in a correct way. And that's where the role of institutional capacity comes in. Out of the 4,800 cities in the country, how many cities today would have the capacity, the institutional capacity, to be able to recognize this kind of an issue, to plan for this kind of an issue, to be able to projectize it, to be able to do the managerial aspects of it? And this is where we will need solid partnership of partners to be able to not just do a one-time build-up of a city sanitation action plan, but to be able to support them in the long run for 3 years, 5 years institutionally to be able to actually implement it. And there cannot be one answer that only an external partner from outside can build up the capacity. Building capacity of the cities is today an issue which has to be dealt at different levels, be it state governments strengthening their human resources, be it about property taxes, user charges coming back into the circularity and sustainability of it, be it a team that is deployed for a project purpose, be it partnership with technical and educational and think tanks to be able to get ideas. So the capacity will have to be augmented in different ways. And for that, SBM 2.0 provides for the necessary willingness, intent, and the funding and flexibility, most importantly, for state governments and cities to be able to deploy this kind of, to enhance this kind of institutional strength. The next thing I would like to also highlight, what was presented here is extremely good. Why is it extremely good? Because it picks up from what is happening in the field. It is very important that you know what's happening there and he knows what's happening there, and all of us together as a fraternity learn from the best practices, our failures and our successes. People keep asking me, why is Indore the cleanest city of India? There is something which Indore is doing correct, which possibly many other cities want to pick up. So while of course you can always organize field visits, peer learning, is that an institutional mechanism? So we thought of creating an institutional mechanism, and we have approved a center of excellence at IIM Indore to be just doing this, sharing best practices amongst municipal officials and team as a regular round-the-year approach, so that more and more cities pick up from what has worked and what are the learnings from what has not worked. Similarly, we are also looking at when we are looking at a long journey and a very challenging journey, here we are talking about, Richa showed around 11 to 13 crore metric ton of legacy waste there. Richa, our assessment is it is nothing less than 16 crore metric ton. And that is the kind of quantum which lies there on the dump sites. And with that, there is a fresh waste that is coming daily. Now, the beauty of the discussion right now is nobody in this ecosystem is talking of any one category of waste in silo. If you meet anybody, ma'am, today, everybody is speaking of multi-pronged approach, wherein the dialogue is about what are you doing about your fresh waste, what are you doing about your legacy waste. So this kind of a quantum to be able to handle 1.5 lakh that gets generated every day, and a 16 crore metric ton that lies in dump sites every day cannot happen with only, again, the intent of the government or the enabling policy or the capacity of institutions. Another key stakeholder in this is the capacity of the private sector to be able to come forth strongly and partner this entire operation. Richa very beautifully presented certain aspects where we have learned that simple contracting will no more work. It is not an engineering solution. It's not a highway. It's not an infrastructure where you do a tender and you give it to a private partner and you leave the private partner to deal with the remaining issues of what is to do with the byproducts, how to get your clearances on time, what to do with the waste to energy plant that you've installed there to take care of the legacy waste, what happens after 3 years and 5 years, etc. It has to be a partnership in the real sense. And for that, we have to strongly work, and we are committed to do that, to work with the private sector so that more and more private players come in. There is a forum that I would in fact request CSC if you could think of a structured forum wherein there is regular interaction between the private sector, between academicians and researchers, and between cities, so that a triangle is formed of mutual co-learning, and then we move forward. Another very important aspect in this whole journey would be the importance of, I would say again, another triad that would be very key: education, innovation, and research. We cannot say that after 5 years we are going to trigger innovation, or we cannot say that the research that we have in place is enough to give us solutions for all the challenges. And we cannot say that all the courses that we have today is enough investment to build the future for tomorrow. So what are we doing today to invest in innovation, education, and in research? For that, to make a beginning, we are partnering with a couple of organizations that are looking at the different courses that are there in the sector, and also the short-term and long-term modules that are there for training and capacity building. So while there could be some long-term approaches, there could be some short-term approaches, and post-COVID, the digital world has opened an opportunity before us which we never experienced. So e-learning could be again a very powerful tool by which people could get learning modules at convenience. So this is again another area where I would request partners like CSC to come and join hands with us, so that the educational aspect of it is sort of, we take it a step further. We have also started our discussions with around 8 to 10 IITs and other technical institutions for topics of research. And for that, what we are looking at is a reverse pitching. Instead of me telling that please do this kind of a research, we are looking at cities to do a reverse pitching, where a commissioner or a mission director reverse pitches that these are the challenges that I am facing when I am implementing. And we would openly invite research institutions to come forth and pick up any of those topics, and we will be happy to fund any of those and trigger some game-changing research in the sector. For example, Honorable Prime Minister mentioned, let's have Swachh Tirth. So the moment he mentioned, let's have Swachh Tirth, I sent a team to both Amarnath and to Kedarnath. My team comes back from Kedarnath and they say, Madam, the maximum challenge that we find is of what is to do with the mule dung. Given the temperature, given the weather condition, the dung is not decomposing at that level. And the mule operators are not willing to pick it up from those heights and get it down to a place where we could have a centralized facility. So what do we do about economic and convenient way of mule dung decomposition and management? Similarly, every city could have multiple challenges. So this is a time when we must provide forums for reverse pitching so that administrators and practitioners could actually pitch their issues before not just educational institutions for research, but also for startups to pick up on ideas and to innovate. And we did exactly something like that on a very small scale, not a very small scale, but a reasonable scale, I would say, where we picked up 4 themes and put it up in front of the startup fraternity. For the past 6 months, we have been running a Swachh Startup Challenge based on 4 themes. And I'm happy to share the 240 applications came in. Right now, we have identified the leading 30 solutions. And we are not going to just give them a one-time prize and sort of forget about it. We are going to ensure that for startups, what is the biggest problem? They cannot get into government procurement, right? They cannot sort of qualify into tenders. So we are looking at a marriage between the ULB and the startup, where startup solutions have been listed that has been showcased before ULBs, and ULBs are requested that you now pick up which solution you want depending on the challenge that you're facing. And I'm happy to share in this forum that all these 30 solutions have now found their partner ULBs. They will be given a place to operate. From Government of India, we are giving them a 20 lakh seed money, which will sort of trigger. And we are also incubating them for 1 full year in IIT Kanpur, which is the largest incubation center for startups, so that they know how to package, they know how to market, they know how to get finances, they have a network, and it is not a one-time challenge and leaving them, happy and up there on the stage, and after that, nothing. And we are committed to take this forward, not by challenges only, but we are opening a Swachh gateway on the portal. We have tried with this challenge. We see this is working. We will open the online portal gateway, and startups will be, after that, requested to just keep and join that pipeline. We keep seeing that they keep getting into the incubation center, the technologies, the work is there, and the cities will be free to pick up from those. And that is where we are expecting that we will trigger again a collaboration which will not be reversible. Another aspect which is very, very important here is anything that cannot be measured cannot be monitored. Whatever that we are discussing here today, what Richa was presenting, what Sunita ma'am was presenting here is based on data, where somebody has made some kind of an assessment, somebody has made some kind of a reporting, and all that we are planning today, all that we are discussing about today is based on data. And data comes from where? Measurement. Now, these are areas where traditionally we have not invested much in measurement, be it frameworks, architecture, defining the parameters, being able to capture those, not this one right now, let's not sort of divert. I think we can switch. No, you can switch this off. I don't need this right now. I think. So we say that so and so quantum of waste lies there. Who has measured it? Sometimes it is just a guess estimate. Sometimes it is maybe some extremely advanced city today is trying to use some drone. Somebody is using something else. It is all estimate. What is the kind of municipal solid waste that is arising? Where is it going? Again, while some of them have very clear measurements which are integrated to the integrated command control center. Not every city has that. We will have to work together as a team again to first decide which are those important things that must be captured, must be measured. And when we say that these are the things that must be measured, and by this time all of us have a fair idea as to which are those things that need to be measured, we need to see that we have enablers capturing those measurements. If we say, for example, ma'am, you mentioned, how is it that we can capture the kind of impact and emissions which is there from a particular dump site? I would, for example, want to know that while this is the impact, what is the post-remediation impact also? So to be able to capture this, what are those parameters, tools, and platforms? Let's work together to finalize those. Then very importantly, platform. Everything that you measure, you can monitor. And only when you monitor such a huge work of this kind of a scale within this kind of a time frame with so much of resources, unless we monitor, these 5 years will be an incredible opportunity lost, and we cannot afford that. So to be able to do that, we have come up with a simple initiative. For us, the dialogue with the city is what? A, approve your action plans. B, give you funding support. C, give you capacity building support. D, engage and partner with you so that you can trigger a lot of mobilization and activity. We also kind of enable city that, okay, you are doing this work. Instead of each of you trying to measure what you are doing, let Government of India curate an architecture by which we can measure for the entire nation what is happening. And for that, we have come up with what we call as garbage-free city certification. So a garbage-free city certification is done by an independent third-party evaluator who go and measure annually what is the city doing as far as its garbage management is concerned, which is solid waste management is concerned. The aspiration is every city by the end of 2026 should be a 3-star certified garbage-free city. And what is a 3-star certified garbage-free city? Layman's term, you can say that 60% of its waste is managed effectively and scientifically in the correct way, processed in the correct way. Similarly, there's a 5-star, there's a 1-star, and the maximum standard, the gold standard for India is 7-star garbage-free city. Till now, after 8 years, we are still waiting for India's first 7-star garbage-free cities. We have a few cities that have reached the league of 5-star garbage-free cities. 3-star are those aspirational fast movers, 1-star are those beginners. But this is a framework which is already in place to, may not be perfection, but in a way systematize, standardize, and be able to measure and monitor at scale for the entire country what we are doing for garbage management. The same certification process we have for ODF, which is for our sanitation. And then we realized that something is very, very important. If I tell you, sir, you may like to have a look at this pencil and so, you will possibly look at this pencil, have a look at it. The moment I tell you, sir, your pencil looks very small, his pencil is looking big, your tendency would be to look at your side person and see how come his pencil is bigger and mine is smaller. So positive competition is a great way to nudge action, and we have learned that through our experience of 8 years. And I'm happy to share that consistently, even in the times of COVID, India has been able to conduct what is now known as possibly one of the world's largest cleanliness surveys, which is Swachh Sarvekshan, an extremely comprehensive tool. Could be having some downfalls, flip sides, do not deny that, but look at the kind of impact that Swachh Sarvekshan has made. Look at the kind of scale, the kind of data point that it captures, the citizen validation that it captures year after year, and it has propelled cities to move in a positive direction. I'll give you just 2 examples. Nobody was looking at back lanes. Ma'am, you mentioned about backyards. We simply we looked at Swachh Sarvekshan as a managerial tool to nudge activity and not just a competition and assessment. We just put a small indicator, backlane cleaning. How do you, in fact, we didn't stop at backlane cleaning. We said backlanes as the new placemaking. Cities are congested. On the main door, there will be traffic. People do not have large areas where children can play, where ladies can sit down, chit chat, community spaces are reducing. Can we look at backlanes as the new public space, wherever it is possible? And trust me, magic began. So many cities started looking at backlanes with a new lens. Can this actually be redeveloped into a area where small children can play in the evening, where ladies can sit down, people can dry things, and it triggered a change. Similarly, we started putting small indicators into Swachh Sarvekshan that has now started triggering action. For example, we put zero waste events. When you say zero waste events, starting from conceptualizing an event till actually implementing it, we told them that how many such, can you just conduct 5 events in a city, which after the closure of the event do not leave a trail of garbage and litter. Cities started with 5. Some started taking up the challenge and they took up 10. Now there are cities that have the courage to say that we are in a position to conduct all events in a garbage-free manner. So this is how Swachh Sarvekshan as a tool has been triggering and nudging positive action through competition amongst cities. Another important thing is financing. We have, we call this, this is a very, I would say, a partnership and a very unique manner in which the Swachh Bharat 2.0 started. Can any of you tell me how did SBM 2.0 start? Of course, all of us know Honorable Prime Minister launched this. Honorable Prime Minister gave the vision of garbage-free city. How did it actually take its first step? What was the birth step, the birthing step? The birthing step of Swachh Bharat was a tripartite digital memorandum of understanding between cities, state governments, and the union government to create garbage-free and water-secure cities. That is how it took its birth. So all of us have come together through a MOU signed by all state governments and cities that we will work towards water secure and garbage-free cities. And towards that, the Government of India, of course, through the Central Financial Assistance, provides a central funding, state governments do their share, there is convergence to the Finance Commission, but at the same time, continuous parallel dialogue happens as to how funds can be leveraged, how innovative models of public-private partnership can come up. We are seeing in many cities, there has not been a requirement of funding for projects. The land and the waste, because the waste is the resource, is enough for an operator to start taking interest. However, important is we do not leave the operator only with the land and the waste. We will have to work with the operator till the end of the journey and not just leave at that. So financing is not really a problem today because there are various innovative models and there is an appetite to take more. What is important is very, very fruitful partnerships wherein the private sector, the government, the NGOs, the society at large come together in a very meaningful and a long-term partnership. The next point I would like to highlight is there is a thread that binds all that I have said, and there is a thread which is around 2.0. Same for whether I'm talking of legacy dump site or legacy waste, or I'm talking of fresh waste. What is that thread which is binding the entire thing? I mentioned about 3R, I mentioned about garbage-free city vision, I mentioned about partnerships, but what is that other thread? The thread is that of circularity. I mentioned at the beginning that gone are the times when we were looking at it in piecemeal and ad hoc, in an ad hoc manner. Today, when we look at an action plan, when we get into discussions with cities, with partners, the only language and the bottom line is of circularity. Because somewhere it is going somewhere. Everywhere it is going somewhere. So where is it going? Are we able to derive resource from the waste? And if you think for a second, our cities are possibly the monopoly holders of waste. Because if they are the ones who are doing door-to-door collection, then this entire resource is with the cities. So the cities will have to plan as to what percentage can be recovered out of it. It is interesting to see young officers try and think, what can I derive out of my construction demolition waste? What can I derive out of my wet waste? And it is very heartening to see, even if initial steps have started, but the key is at scale. The initial steps are not in pilots. The initial steps, even if these are 5 steps, are happening across in numerous cities. There are so many temples today where their organic waste is going into SHGs who have a livelihood linkage in making it into agarbattis, dhoop cones, diyas, X, Y, Z. There are so many people today who are employed and engaged using the cloth waste that comes and refurbishing them into reusable materials. I will share another small example with you. Right now, from 2nd of October, Government of India is having a cleanliness drive like last year within office premises. We have sent a request to every office within the Government of India that please let us know if you're interested to put up a 3R kiosk within your office premise. Whatever files, folders, A, B, C, anything that comes out, normally what do? We just auction it, some Radiwala comes, etc., etc. Why don't we have a systematic way where there is a 3R kiosk, and this idea can be taken up by any private organization, any place which is a bulk generator of waste, where 3R kiosk systematically linked with SHGs and other groups who work in the business of recycling can actually take it up. I'm looking forward to see what kind of numbers will come up, and I'll be happy to share that with all of you. My last point is, while we have spoken of the centrality of ideas, we have spoken of the thread, we have spoken of the 360-degree approach, what is the soul of Swachh Bharat? The soul of Swachh Bharat is people's participation, is Jan Andolan. And what we have witnessed, friends, in the past 8 years is by far the world's largest people's participation program in sanitation anywhere across in the country. So many people contributing, participating in a spirit of volunteerism, coming ahead, contributing whatever they have, be it knowledge, be it expertise, be it activity, be it shram, be it whatever, they have come forth and we have moved this far. It is very important for all of us to keep this fire alive. And for a mature program like Swachh Bharat, where we have done it for 8 years, we have a risk that fatigue may set in. Therefore, we need to charge, continuously charge, reiterate, keep on engaging. And for that, every stakeholder will have to be brought in very effectively. From 2nd of October, we are beginning again another round of national campaign, which focuses only on source segregation. We will be looking forward to the participation of all of you. And as a build-up, before we embark on the first year completion of 2.0, we are beginning it with what we call as our energy of 2.0, and the energy providers are none but the youth. I will request all of you to kindly just have a look at what we have here. We call it Rally of Youth for Garbage-Free Cities. Could you please connect? The idea is our Safai Mitras are doing a cleanliness work every day around the year. Our supervisors are waking up in the morning and cleaning it up every day. While we sleep, our workers come up, they clean the city so that when we wake up into clean roads, clean cities. One day, just one day in the year, can the youth of the country come forth and take up a small portion, if not all, for their city. And because youth is about energy, youth is about enthusiasm, so we decided, let's make it into a league, a match, a game. So we call it the first edition of Indian Swachhata League, wherein municipal corporations, ULBs, will not be playing. They will just be facilitators. Every city, you form a team, identify a captain, and let the volunteer registration be absolutely voluntary to open to anybody who wishes to join. And we opened the portal. I'm happy to share, starting from Leh, Ladakh till Kanyakumari, 1,855 cities have come forth to compete with each other on parameters of cleanliness led by youth on the 17th of September. And they have come up with full-fledged preparation. Somebody has said, I will take up a 10-kilometer of mangrove cleaning. Somebody has said, I will do the entire city's bush and drain cleaning by my youth post-monsoon. Somebody has said, I will go up for beach cleaning. Somebody is taking up mountains. Somebody is taking up tourist locations. Brilliant ideas by the youth have come up, and it will be the youth that will be triggering it. I will be very happy if you join your own city's team. This is the league. The portal for joining is on the MyGov. I will request all of you, if you have the Twitter handle, please visit it. The QR code is there. The registration is a very, very simple method wherein you just have to put in your city. The moment you put in your city details, the exact plan of the league comes up. Do join, do encourage the youth of your team, and do contribute towards 2.0. And similarly, after the 17th, we will have a day-long event for startups in the Swachh sector on the 20th. I formally invite all of you. All the details will be there on the website. Of course, to CSC team, I will be sending the individual invitations, but all of you present here, please join us there. And thereafter on 26th, we will again have something very interesting, which is putting waste to play, which is launching the Toycathon, trying to make toys out of waste, and not just toys, but based on the concept of F, U, and N. We will have 3 categories of entries. F is fun and learn, where children can make small toys out of waste. Any individual can make small toys for different cognitive learning. Also, it will be an enabler. U is for use and enjoy. There are so many spaces in cities which can be completely done up with used materials, reused. So can you contribute? If your idea is good, your city is, you're going to simply pick up your idea and put it in the public place of that city. And N is for new from old, where we expect startups and enterprises to come forth and do something, remodel waste into some new kinds of toys. So that will be FUN on the 26th. And then, of course, on the 1st of October is 1 year completion of 2.0, where all of us as the 2.0 team should celebrate. And I look forward to all of you joining hands with us. Let us commit ourselves wholly, fully, and completely to make Indian cities garbage-free and manage our wastes well, so that we do not have in future more legacy dump sites. And for this point of time, let our Laksh be zero dump site. Thank you, all of you. All the very best.
Thank you, Rupaji. That was really brilliant. I love your passion. I think we all share your commitment. And we definitely will take up the issues further. Atin, I think we'll break for tea now, yes, because we have a session beginning at 12. So I would suggest if you could wrap up now.
So it was a fascinating discussion, back to back, and thank you, Rupa ma'am, for sharing your dreams with all of us. And we hope that this fraternity and people who are watching us live in this program will also share our dreams and join hands. So now we'll break for tea. Tea is being served outside. So it's 11:45. So it's 20-minute break. So we'll be back to this room at 5 minutes past 12. Thank you.